Okay, now I'd like to demonstrate some warm-up exercises applied to the guitar. So pick up your guitars again. And basically what I'm going to show you is a few exercises concentrating on the stretching and independence of the left hand, and a few exercises concentrating on the freedom and accuracy of the right hand, and then we'll combine the two. Remember, the goal here is not to develop mega speed, but really just to warm up your hands and get them comfortable so later on we can accomplish some bigger tasks. So first let's work on the first left hand exercise. I suggest that you start this exercise higher up on the neck, because once we get into some stretches, it's going to be a little bit difficult as you go down low where the frets are bigger. And basically, your right hand isn't really that important right now. I was playing the notes separately. You can play them as chords if you'd like. You can play them without a pick. It really doesn't matter. We're concentrating on the left hand. Make sure that the notes ring out clearly, because what we're really working on is the stretching and independence of your left hand. Also use a pretty strong pressure. Now what's happening here is that I'm playing on 4 adjacent strings with a basic chord shape. It sounds pretty ugly. In fact, most of these chord shapes sound ugly, so turn your volume down when you practice. And then we're taking the 2 inside fingers, 2 and 3, and we're reversing them like this. Then we're taking your 2 outside fingers, 1 and 4, and reversing them. And then taking the 2 inside fingers and putting them back to their starting position. The next step is to just move up the chord shape to the next string group. So between the A and the B string, and repeat the same motion, and then move up to the last string group between the low E and the G string, and repeat the same 4 chords again. Okay, what I just played is the continuation of the first warm-up exercise. Basically, when you're through, you're going to have a sequence of stretches that continue down the neck. So this is considered part 2. And what I did is I started in our original position, which was between the low E and the G, and we were in the 10th position, and I stretched the first finger down a half step and kept the rest where they were, and did the same sequence of finger moves. So in other words, then reversing the 2 middle fingers, then the 2 outer, and then the 2 middle again, and just continued up to the next string group, and then to the final string group again. Alright, that was part 3 of the exercise, and at the end of part 2 we ended up with this position between the first string groups. Now what you're going to do is put your fingers back in order, and while leaving your 3rd and 4th where they are, stretch your 2nd down a half step. So we have this shape, and once again continue with the moves all the way up the string groups. Now for the final part. Okay, that was the final part, and if you haven't guessed already, what we did is we moved our third finger down a half step while keeping the pinky where it was. So we had this shape. This time the stretch is between your third and fourth finger, and continue with the pattern until we got up to the first set of strings again. And then all you do is you bring your pinky down a half step, which brings you to the exact same shape that you started with, but you're a half step lower, because we started originally in the 10th position, now we're in the 9th position. And that's the first warm-up exercise. Okay, the second warm-up exercise for your left hand is basically a variation of the one that we just finished. You can start in the 10th position again with the same setup, and we're going to do the same moves. Except this time we're going to do some different stretches with the left hand. And by the way, you don't have to arpeggiate the notes. You can just strum the chords if you'd like. Okay, this stretch was different in that instead of moving one finger down a half step, we moved the first finger down a half step and the fourth finger up a half step. So we have a double stretch between the third and the fourth and the first and the second. And then we did the same exact moves. Okay, now we'll do the final variation on this exercise, and this involves yet a larger stretch. Here's how it goes. All right, what we did here on the final variation is instead of just having a stretch between the first and second and the third and fourth, we have a half-step stretch now between every finger. So you do that by moving your first finger down yet another half step, and then your second finger down a half step as well. Remember when doing these exercises to make sure that the notes ring clearly, and see just how far down the neck you can go by moving downward by half steps. Now, for all you crazy guitarists out there, there is one more variation that involves some super stretches. Remember, don't hurt yourself. As you can see, I started out in a lower position, which made the final stretch a lot more difficult. Let me break it down for you now. With this exercise, instead of having all your fingers on adjacent strings, we start with the two middle fingers, 2 and 3, on the two middle strings, D and G, and your first and fourth fingers on the low and high E strings. And then you just continue with the same moves that we've been doing throughout. The moves from here should look familiar. We move the first finger down a half step, and the fourth finger up a half step, and then the first finger down one more half step, and the second finger down another half step, creating a full step between each finger for the ultimate stretch. What I usually do is I play these exercises in sequence, one after the next without stopping. I start on the 12th or 10th fret and work my way down chromatically until I can't stretch anymore. Now let's turn our attention to right hand exercises, and you can give your left hand a rest. The next exercise concentrates on the flow and precision of the right hand and has many variations. So let me demonstrate it in its basic form. As you just heard, that exercise involved notes that were being arpeggiated intervallically. So let's talk about the left-hand shapes that I was going through. It's based off of a major bar chord form with an added third, except you're playing the notes separately. And then we just sort of intervallically disperse those notes. Now that bar chord is moved up through a progression that doesn't make too much sense, but at least makes the exercise a little bit more interesting. It goes A major, C major, E major, C sharp major, G major, B major, and F sharp major. All right, now let me show you the pattern that we're doing throughout the chord or arpeggio. We're starting on the root, we're skipping a string, and going to the next note in the arpeggio. Then you're going to the second note of the arpeggio, in this case which is E, skipping a string again. Then to the third note of the arpeggio, the fourth. So we have remember to pick down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. To descend, you start on the added third, which is C sharp on the E string, and skip down to the G string. Then up to the B, and skip down to the D. Up to the G, skip to the A. Up to the D string, and skip to the E. Remember once again to keep your right hand picking consistent. Down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Don't let that falter at all. So here's what it sounds like when you combine the two. And then from there, just go through the sequence of chords that I outlined earlier, and you have the entire exercise. Okay, now that you know the initial exercise, all the variations involve the right hand, and we're going to concentrate on our picking. First of all, instead of starting with a downstroke and using down, up, down, up, down, up, do the same exercise starting on an upstroke and consistently playing up, down, up, down, up, down throughout the entire exercise. That's going to look like this. It might be a little bit more difficult at first, but the reason we're doing this is so in any situation you'll be able to pick. You're not always going to have the comfort of starting on your favorite stroke, whether it's down or up. You should be able to sort of get through anything that comes your way. Now the other variations involve playing more than one time on each note. We're going to start with playing twice on each note, then 3 times on each note, and then finally 4 times on each note. Not only that, but starting each sequence with a down and then with an up. So let me demonstrate through the one chord what these will look like on your right hand. We'll start with the doubles, starting on a down. Then double starting with an up. Then 3 times starting with a down. Three times starting with an up. Four times starting with down. And finally 4 times starting with an upstroke. Alright, what you're going to do is play each one of those variations through the entire chord sequence. Just remember to keep the notes very even, and also to keep that consistent alternate picking, especially when you're playing triplets, going from one string to the next, because there's an odd amount of notes per string. Really watch that you are keeping a consistent down, up, down, up. Now let me demonstrate what it would sound like playing 2 notes per string through the entire sequence, just so you can have an example. I basically have technique broken down into 4 categories. 1 is scalar or linear examples, 2 is arpeggiated examples, 3 is left hand or legato playing, and 4 is sweep picking. And what I do is I have files in a file cabinet, and I collect information from videos and books and lessons and whatever, and I file them according to topic. If it's an arpeggio thing that I learned from a magazine, I rip it out and stick it into the arpeggio section. And then when it comes time to practice, instead of saying, oh, there's millions of things, how am I going to practice all this stuff? Basically, I make a master list of what's in all those files. And that list changes from day to day. You constantly add to it. And you sit down and you basically customize a practice session. So let's say you have about 2 hours to practice. I personally have 4 categories, so I'd pick one item from each one of those categories and practice that item for a half hour. Move on to the next, practice that for a half hour. And then by the time I'm done after 2 hours, I've covered the entire topic of technique. Okay, now that we concentrated on the left hand and the right hand individually, let me show you a few exercises that are equally effective for both hands. Okay, this exercise starts with your first finger on the low E string on the first fret in the first position, skips over the A string, goes with your second finger on the D string on the note E, and then your third finger on the G string on the note B flat, and your fourth finger on the high E string on the note A flat. And your right hand is picking, once again, down, up, down, up. Now the next step is to simply flip your hand, sort of like a mirror image. So your first finger is now on the high E, and your fourth finger is on the low E, and start from the high E and go down to low E with the picking, down, up, down, up. And combine the two. What I did after that is I ascended chromatically, and you should take this all the way up to the 12th fret, and then descend using a similar but slightly different pattern. Here's how it goes. Okay, all I did there is instead of starting on the first finger and ascending 1, 2, 3, 4, we started on the pinky, on the high E, and descended 4, 3, 2, 1. Once again picking alternately, and then we reversed that image like a mirror and started on the 4th finger once again on the low E. Alright, since this exercise involves alternate picking through string skips, make sure that your right hand picking is very accurate and that you keep your pick close to the strings so you don't hit the string that you're actually skipping. It's called efficiency of motion. Now, you should also practice the same exact exercise starting on an upstroke as well to make sure that you're ambidextrous. No. That was a slight variation on the exercise that we just did. Instead of playing the notes in order, 1, 2, 3, 4, I'm playing 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2. And the notes and skips are exactly the same. Make sure you keep the picking alternate. Let me show you now the descending version. Alright, that was another slight variation, this time on the descending pattern. Instead of playing 4, 3, 2, 1, you play 4, 2, 1, 3, 4, 2, 1, 3, and continue that pattern down the neck chromatically. Remember to keep your picking alternate the entire time. And that will wrap up our warm-up exercises. I usually play these type of exercises for, I guess, about 10 to 20 minutes before actually tackling some more difficult practicing or a gig or whatever. And it usually helps to get both hands acclimated to the guitar, especially when you're cold. So have fun and make sure you warm up. In order to realize our creative visions, it's essential that we develop the craft of our instrument, which leads us to the area of technique. I'm going to show you a whole bunch of different exercises that concentrate on developing speed and accuracy. Now for me, the most effective tool for developing these areas is the metronome. Whether that metronome is a simple click or a drum machine or sequencer isn't important. The important thing is that there's a steady and even pulse. Now practicing and playing to a metronome will help you to play accurately at any speed and also show you how to subdivide the beat any which way that you want. Now the first exercise involves a very familiar looking shape. It's based off of an A major scale in the 4th position, 2 octaves. So let me show you that fingering first. This exercise involves playing to a steady pulse. In other words, the speed or tempo of the click is not going to change, but how we subdivide that click is going to change. First, we'll start with playing 1 note per beat, which is chord notes. Now, I have a metronome setting of 66 beats per minute, which is really slow, but by the time we're done, you're going to be playing a lot of notes per beat, so it's important that we start slow. Remember also to keep a consistent down, up, down, up, down, up picking pattern the entire time. Here is chord notes to the metronome. 3, 4. playing this, remember, it might seem easy, but really concentrate getting even spacing between all those notes. It's actually more difficult when you have a lot of space in between the clicks. Now let me demonstrate eighth notes to the metronome. This would be 2 notes per beat. 3, 4. And now triplets, which is 3 notes to the beat. 3, 4. The next division is 16th notes, 4 notes per beat. 3, 4. Now we're getting a bit faster. The next division is 6 notes per beat, or 16th note triplets. And the last group is 32nd notes, or 8 notes per beat. And this is going to be quite faster than what we started. But remember, the pulse didn't change at all. It's just the division of that pulse. 3, 4. Okay, now that you're familiar with playing to a metronome and subdividing the beats, I'd like to show you how to increase your speed. And what we're going to do here is we're going to develop accuracy at high speeds. The basic concept is you start with a slow tempo on the metronome, play the exercise or example as many times until you've mastered it at that tempo, and then increase the metronome about 8 beats per minute, and then play the exercise over and over at that tempo, increase it, and so on until you get to your desired tempo. I'm going to demonstrate this with an exercise that uses chromatics, 4 fingers in a row, and they're played as 16th notes to the metronome. Let me show you the exercise first, then I'll show you how to develop the speed. As I mentioned, this exercise is based off of a 16th note pattern, which means you're going to be playing 4 notes per beat. Besides concentrating on getting those notes to fall evenly over each click, you should also accent every 4 notes. In other words, every time the click comes down, accent with a harder pick stroke. So your group of 4 would sound like this. Etc., etc. And what this is going to enable you to do is when you get faster and faster, that accent will be your reference point. In other words, at a slow tempo, your accent might just sound like etc., and you'll be able to know where you are. But at a faster tempo, when the notes are whizzing by, your accent might be, in other words, and that's how you know exactly where you are when you're playing at fast tempos. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you how I would take this exercise and develop it speed-wise. Now, the first thing you have to do is you have to get a goal tempo. let's say our goal tempo for today is 200 beats per minute. Now normally I would start this pretty low on the metronome, maybe about 100 or so, and it would take me quite a while to get to 200. But for the video's purpose, I'll start at about 120 and I'll increase it in larger increments than I would normally do, just to save some time. And what's going to happen is by the time I get to 200, hopefully not only should it be wailing, but it should also be clean. Another thing to keep in mind is your technique that you're using when you're playing slow should be the same technique that you use when you're playing fast. In other words, when you're playing slow, you're programming in your technique. So when you play fast, be consistent in your hand position and also in your left hand position, your right and left. Okay, here we go. Okay, so we finally reached 200. Now, like I said before, normally that would take a lot longer because I'd go in increments of 8. Now, if you find at any point along that development that you just don't have it, it's not coming together, it's not clean, like I'm going up to 200. If 176, I felt like I was pushing it, it's a good idea to back the metronome down, go to a slower speed. So I was at 200, let's say that was difficult, I'll go back down to about 170. Try to get comfortable there first. And then go back up to 200 and see how it feels. On a similar note, if you reach this desired speed that you're going to and you still want to push the envelope a little further, what you can do is, let's say you want to hit 208 now. Go past 208, go to like 216 and just kill yourself, and then go back to 208 and that tempo will feel a lot easier. Let's attempt that. That was very difficult. Let's go back down to 208 and see if it's any easier now. Okay, so it's pretty much there. So you get the idea about pushing the envelope and then going back. Just remember, make sure that you're clean and accurate, and remember to accent the notes as well. Okay, now I'd like to demonstrate the same technique, building speed and accuracy, but this time with a 16th note triplet pattern. You're going to play 6 notes per beat. and it's based off of a 3-note per string pattern in E minor. So here it goes. One, two, three, four. Okay, then you would follow the same steps to get to your goal tempo. Let's say your goal tempo in this case is about 126. Let's hear what it sounds like at that tempo. 1, 2, 3, 4. My first band experience, technically, was actually the first time I even picked up a guitar when I started again when I was 12. And these friends of mine, actually our ex-keyboard player, everybody would gather at his house because he had a piano. And I remember they were playing some Neil Young. They were playing Hey Hey My My. And they assigned me the little down, down, down. That was my part, and I sat there getting that. And I guess that was kind of a band experience. Another good way to develop speed is to work on what I call fragments or segments. That is, if you have a long exercise or passage that's really difficult to play, instead of trying to swallow the whole thing, take bites, work on small sections and develop that section and then connect them one by one until you have the big picture. This way you can concentrate on one little thing at a time as opposed to tons of notes. Now I have several examples of what I call scale fragments, and they're little patterns that you just play over and over and over and over, and eventually I'll show you how to develop these into long scale sequences that you can use in soloing and whatnot. So let's start by going through the different scale fragments. examples I just played were in the key of G major. You can play these anywhere on the neck between any two strings. It doesn't really matter. You can practice them chromatically, meaning if you were playing this one, perhaps play it 4 times in each position and then move up a half step. Or you can pick a key and play them diatonically. In other words, conform your fingers to the notes in the key. You can practice these scale fragments with the metronome, as we discussed, or there's a couple of other ways to develop speed. First way involves playing the exercise over and over and over, but starting in a slow tempo and gradually increasing the speed and then bringing it back down to a slow tempo. So you're almost like revving, you're almost revving your playing. And as you do this, as you play faster, you can also vary the degree of dynamics that you pick with. You can pick harder or softer. It's a really good way to develop the speed. Here's an example. Another way of developing speed is by playing the exercise over and over and over, but this time playing consistently at a slow to moderate tempo and then sort of blasting out a fast tempo only a couple of times. So in other words, you're jogging for a while, then you're going to sprint for a second and go back to jogging. This is a way to build stamina as well as speed. It sounds like this. Now, a fun thing to do when you're working on all these exercises, since they're pretty similar, some of them are using 16th notes and some are 16th note triplets, is to sort of interact. In other words, mix them together. Like you might have one that sounds like, which is what I've been playing for the last couple of seconds. And there was another one that went. There was also another one that went. Try combining some of these exercises randomly and use your imagination. It might sound something like this. Each one of these fragments could now be used in a longer sequence of notes, perhaps a run through a scale or whatnot. So let me show you how a few of these can be developed. 1, 2, 3, 4. You should recognize the first part of that as the 3-note per string fragment that we did before. Except I transposed it to the key of A and played it through an A major scale. And the sequence consisted of playing that same pattern starting from each string. And then using the descending pattern to do the same thing. Now you can play these patterns through the scales, you can change positions, you can play and repeat the sequence in any position as many times as you want, just kind of mix it up, and that makes for a good run in a solo if you're trying to build some tension. I'll demonstrate that a little bit later. Let's move on to another long sequence of notes that's based off of another fragment.